Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to EarthUp's Energy Efficiency webinar. I'm your host, Hunter Motz. I head up content for EarthUp, and I am the least knowledgeable person about energy efficiency on this call, but lucky to be accompanied by three experts. So don't worry, just in case they get too wonky or too nerdy, I'll be here to make sure that everyday folks like us can understand what they're talking about and get all the great benefits that energy efficiency has to offer. So first up is EarthUp's co-founder, Stephen Bay. Stephen, who are you? What do you know about energy efficiency? What's your journey with energy efficiency been?
I'll keep it brief. My name is Stephen Bay, as Hunter just said. My journey in energy efficiency started a little over a decade ago, where I partnered with Puget Sound Energy, which is the biggest utility up in the Pacific Northwest, to go out there, do some outreach, and educate their consumers on energy efficiency. So we did over 30,000 in-person home energy assessments. We also did some commercial retrofits where we go in and update commercial buildings on their lighting, refrigeration, and HVAC, and really finance that product. And we saw a lot of the internal conflicts going from the commercial side and on the residential side.
Perfect. Next up, Chrissy. Who are you? Where are you calling from? And what do you know about energy efficiency? And tell us a bit about your journey.
Chrissy Crowell. I am based in Seattle. And have been working in the energy efficiency industry for over 14 years now, basically my whole career out of college. I've worked in many aspects of it, from program implementation to program design within utilities, doing product development, and now am on the nonprofit side with the Ecology Action is our parent company. Taper is our subsidiary, where we are working with large commercial customers, primarily grocery, to help them identify energy efficiency opportunities in their buildings in a comprehensive way, and really providing a one-stop shop to implementing energy efficiency projects. And within Taper, I work on the design of our products that we're putting out with our sales team, as well as interacting with contractors and sourcing our materials.
Awesome. And last but by no means least, we have a caller on the phone, Crystal. Crystal, where are you from? What's your experience with energy efficiency?
I might actually be the least knowledgeable person on this call, Hunter, just so you know. So I'm actually calling from lovely Prescott, Arizona. On your map, it looks like Prescott. I am officially tied to Boeing's Mesa, Arizona site, but I moved to the Mesa site shortly before the world kind of got turned upside down. So I've been riding out COVID in the beautiful hills of northern Arizona. So it's quite lovely. My background is a bit unique, and although I think I have a fairly typical education and kind of early career experience, environmental studies degree, first job focusing on solid waste, then water, then energy, then all of them at once. And then I just kind of continued to build from there, but in a challenging and interesting sort of way. I basically built my career around changing behaviors. So I'm super fascinated by the complexity that people bring to the sustainability equation. So like I said, in terms of my energy efficiency background, I don't necessarily have one. So sorry about that, you guys. My approach to energy is basically the same as my approach to changing behaviors around any topic. So I just work to figure out what barriers prevent employees from engaging in the behaviors we want them to. And then I work to remove those barriers, and I do it by using some behavior science techniques. So that's me and my journey.
Well, Crystal, you never have to worry about being the least knowledgeable person about energy efficiency, because I have that distinction. And like you, my background is also in behavior change. So I'm excited to talk about that. So as you can see on this call, we've assembled the best of the best. We've got people who have done residential energy efficiency, worked with utilities, worked in the commercial space, supermarkets, giant airplane companies, behavior change. It's all here for you. And so we're going to start to unpack that, synthesize together. And, at the end of this webinar, you're going to really emerge with a really, really solid of what is energy efficiency? Why does it matter? How can it benefit my life? and how can I implement it, whether it's in your own home or in your giant corporation. So first up, we're going to dig in with Stephen Bay. Stephen, tell us about your journey with energy efficiency and what you were doing.
So touched on it a little bit before, but about 10 years ago, I really wanted to break into the sustainability field, and I was, making, soldering solar panels together in my garage and making wind turbine blades out of PVC pipe, trying to figure out something. And I ended up finding out about a local utility program where we could actually go out and do outreach and sign individuals up for home energy assessments. So I started that company. I've personally been in the homes of Microsoft employees, Google employees, Amazon, Boeing employees' homes. And I really started to understand what's the common thread between all of them when it comes to what are the issues they're facing. And like Crystal said, why aren't they taking action? And so really working to figure out how to get them to take action in their own homes. And then also how to tie them into a bigger mission of why taking action saves you money, improves your comfort, but also helps reduce your emissions, also helps kind of create, communities of impact. And then from there, really starting to understand.
Hold on, let's back out a little bit here because there's a lot of knowledge in there that needs to be unpacked. So firstly, utilities, in other words, the people who sell me my electricity will give me money to use less electricity. It's a bit counterintuitive, right? Like you wouldn't think that. So tell us more about that.
Chrissy probably is better to jump in on this one. So, I invite Chrissy, but the answer to your question quickly is yes, but Chrissy can jump in why that is a yes.
Yeah, I think the simplest way to put it is the kilowatt hour that isn't used is the cheapest kilowatt hour to provide, right? Mm-hmm. So in the majority of the country, and especially where we live, rates are decoupled from usage. So utilities have to set up front what they're going to charge for their electricity. So every amount that they conserve, that they reduce usage of, is actually increase in profit to the utility. So that's one side of it. And then we also are very fortunate to live in a part of the country where we're regulated and required to provide conservation programs. And actually every one of us on our bill, commercial and residential, pay into what's called a public goods charge. And that funding is then invested into the energy efficiency programs that the utilities put back out. So one of the things we'd like to say at both Taper and in my previous world at the utility is you've already paid this money in. Why don't you take it back? This is a way for you to take that money back and reduce your long-term energy operating expenses. And the utility wants you to do it.
This is great news. There's free money out there that I've already paid for that can be used to improve my home, right? And not only that, in improving my home, I'm also going to save money. I'm going to be more sustainable, and I'm going to get health and comfort benefits too, right? So what are some of the things that these, like Stephen, so you're going out and you're delivering these rebates, right? And making customers aware, like, how are they reacting to these news? What is the kind of rebates that you're offering? What are they for?
So the first question you asked is generally the question like, why would the utility want me to use less energy, right? So you have to let them know it's not a trick, right? They have these programs for a reason. They're not just trying to get into your house, or they're not just trying to serve. Well, they're trying to serve their own purpose, but there is a co-benefit for the individual. But what we learned by going into a lot of these houses is just how most people don't know where to turn. They don't know what problems they have. They don't know that these programs exist. And they don't know the benefits of even caring about this, right? They're like, oh, I can save, between $10 and $50 probably average home on their energy bill a month. And they're like, that's not a huge motivating force for me. But once you start to walk around their home and you get to see, the duct leakage where their ducts aren't actually sealed in their crawl space, which is a huge leak in the energy, but it also pulls in moisture and dust from their crawl space, and then they're complaining about their house always being dusty. Or they sit there and they complain, hey, this back room of mine is extremely, extremely cold all the time, and it's my kid's room. And how do I get that to be? So then they start putting, little heaters in that room, and they're like, well, now it's too hot. And so, all what they never did is look at the attic insulation above it, or maybe there's only a few inches, or maybe it got blown away from the side of the wall through their roof. So what you started to really dive into is energy efficiency is about saving energy. It's about saving money. But what it's really about is improving people's health and comfort inside their home and giving them peace of mind, knowing that their kid's not going to get too hot in the middle of the night. It's not going to be too cold for them. And it's really transitioned over the last 18 to 24 months, now that a lot of people are working from home, to how am I productive when I'm sitting in the same office for 8 to 10 hours? And a lot of the times the offices that we've seen in people's homes they're not dedicated office spaces, right? It's like, I'm going to try to convert my basement, which previously had no insulation, into an office. And I live in Washington, where it gets cold, or I'm in the attic, and in the summertime, it gets extremely, extremely hot. So really understanding, yes, it saves you money, but how do you actually improve your comfort and really create a sustainable place to live in regards to just it's a livable space. So that's one of the main things that we learned from going into all these different homes. And then the other piece of that is, it's not just home energy assessments. There's tons of rebates, whether that's upgrading your furnace and how you heat your home, upgrading insulation, upgrading how you seal your home. And those are primarily the three things that people can really do: is insulate, seal, and then upgrade the actual heating systems. And really educating them on the different benefits, the different costs, and what things to worry about. One of the common things, and I'll stop talking here in a second, but one of the common things that we saw a lot of is in newer homes, they're sealed really tightly. But they bring in fresh air because they're sealed so tightly. So a home normally breathes, air flows out the top, flows in the bottom when you're heating air inside the house. And newer homes don't do that. You actually have to mechanically bring in air, but people don't understand that. So the other thing is just an education on how energy efficiency actually combines with air quality and what you need to do to continue to have a healthy house. And so we saw people that would tear these timers off their wall. And that's bad because now they have no fresh air coming into their house. And then all of a sudden their walls start to decay, and there's mold problems, and their kids have allergies, and the list goes on and on and on. So
you have like these actions that are really just about a well-run home, right? And the utility might care about them because of the energy efficiency benefits, right? But the homeowner might care about it in terms of the health and comfort of their family, maybe saving a little money on their bills, the resale value of their home, any of these other sort of motivators. So in terms of thinking about behavior change, like Crystal was talking about, that seems really, really important, because you have one action, many motivations, and different stakeholders will be motivated by different things.
100%. And one of the things that we didn't mention that's starting to be a bigger motivator is, climate change and reducing your emissions. And a lot of things people don't know is the residential buildings generate more CO2 emissions than all the commercial buildings in the United States, right? So there is thing like us being knowledgeable and educating all the different homes on this is extremely important.
Well, I think that's a really nice segue to go to Chrissy, right? So Chrissy, we're in terms of talking about climate change, we often hear people arguing against the importance of individual impact, right? Because it's like, it's a drop in the bucket. How much are you going to do? Corporations are the biggest polluters. We need big government action, all of that. So why does individual impact really matter? Why does it matter as a homeowner if I'm going to go fix my ducts, improve my insulation, install a smart thermostat?
It's a good question. I think we could get pretty philosophical, but let's look at voting as a good example, right? If everyone didn't vote, then the loudest voices would choose our destiny, right? As we work together as a community, we can make a bigger impact. I think from a utility perspective, we often really monitored participation in our programs, and that made us decide whether or not we invested in that program, if we improved the design of that program, if we could find better costs through contractor relationships. And so every little bit contributes to this bigger picture of program design, of really targeting funding in the places where it's going to make the most impact. And so I think, much like anything, the collective is going to be more impactful than each individual, but it starts with the individual. I would also say another maybe analogy, as we've all been through COVID, nobody really realized how big their bubble was, right? Yeah. Until we all had to isolate and reduce the number of contacts we had. It's the same thing when you start, putting solar panels on your roof, it's funny how many of your neighbors start thinking about putting solar panels on their roof when you buy a Prius. I mean, it's been proven, and I bet Crystal can talk to this from a behavioral change standpoint. When we are animals that watch what each other does and often follow the pack or herds, right? And then we also, I'm a mother of two. My daughters have known what energy efficiency is and energy conservation is since they were two. We joke that we're earth doctors. When my daughter came home from daycare one day and said, "The earth's sick, mommy. What are we going to do? The earth's sick." And I'm like, well, good thing we're earth doctors. We're here to make a difference. We're here to make the earth feel better. And we could do that by using less water and turning the lights off. And I have her following me around, turning the lights off, 4 years old, right? So I think that the small things we do add up because we're just ripples in a big ocean of people.
I think, yeah, I'd love to hear what Crystal thinks, but I know for me personally, I have been a diligent New York Times reader for a long time and read all the depressing articles on climate change. And, it just seemed like such a far away problem. And then through working on EarthUp with Stephen and the team, it's like, oh crap, there's all these things that I can be doing in my everyday life. And so you move from feeling disempowered and overwhelmed to practicing it in your own life, and then you have a real tangible understanding of it, and it actually feels actionable. So I also think that there's as you say, both in terms of whether you're a 4-year-old coming home from kindergarten, right, or whether I won't disclose my age, and you're just oppressed by reading the New York Times, right? There's a sense of empowerment, and it can really help with that sort of eco anxiety, and ultimately lead to larger action. Crystal, thoughts, comments from Mesa, Arizona?
Prescott, thank you very much.
I'm sorry.
So I have a lot. There was a lot there. So one thing that I think is super interesting about impact at the individual level is that people are complex, right? And they're super funny, right? So people believe they can make an impact when it's something that they absolutely want to do. But when it's something that they don't want to do, all of a sudden they have no idea how to make an impact, right? And there's that, you guys know, kind of that running saying in the energy world, employees know where the light switch is when they want the lights on, but have no idea where the light switch is when the light should be turned off, right? And so what I do kind of in my work is, you guys just talked about a lot of things. I don't spend a tremendous amount of time in my day-to-day work tying employee actions to climate change. Not saying it doesn't happen, not saying it's not super, super important, but Hunter, like you said, it's overwhelming and people start to turtle and well, I'd rather not try to do anything because I have no idea where to start, right? So we do some of the hard work for them. We isolate the very individual behavior, the action that we want them to do, isolated down to one specific thing. We figure out why they're not doing it, what are those barriers, and then we work with them to remove them. And we do it in a variety of different ways, which I'm guessing we'll get to at some point in this conversation. But just like what Chrissy said with the ripple effect, right? Social norms, peer pressure are proven behavior science techniques to get change and to scale some of the things we're trying to do. So, it's a complicated beast, but it's super cool to watch it in action and super cool to watch it work.
Amazing. Well, we're excited to dig back in. And next time I call on you, I'll be sure to not only say your town, but try and pronounce it correctly and not use the map spelling. But that'll be a challenge for me later in the call. But Chrissy, so tell us more about some of these rebates that utilities are offering, right? Because the other interesting thing is, you talked about evaluating different rebate programs and looking at their benefit. One of the things that was also really surprising to me in talking to Stephen was that there's a real focus on reaching out to low-income communities, right? So tell us about that.
Yep. So on the residential side, you're going to find rebates that reduce the cost of replacing your water heater, or reduce the cost of replacing your heater, installing insulation, like Stephen mentioned, to reduce air loss from your home and really, maximize the benefit of your heating systems. utilities, again, are designing these rebates in a way that they can reduce the cost of what you're doing enough to make it reasonable. So rebates are based on what we call incremental measure cost. If you think about a more efficient piece of equipment, it's usually going to be more expensive. And so rebates are meant to drive the market to say, well, we're going to take that more efficient piece of equipment and we're going to make it the same price as the less efficient equipment so that you're more likely to buy it. And a contractor is more likely to sell it to you because at the end of the day, a contractor wants to make the deal. So we're trying to encourage the contractors to promote those more efficient pieces of equipment. So that's rebates kind of from the residential side. On the commercial side, often they get a little more complex, where you're really measuring how much energy a project saves, and the incentive is based on the savings. I personally like to use the word incentive over rebate because we are trying to motivate the customer to take an action, where a rebate is kind of like, I took the action and now I do a mail-in and I get a nice check for that. And anyone who's applied for a contact rebate knows 7 to 10 weeks later, you're lucky if you see it. Like utilities, they do provide these dollars. They can provide them really quickly, and especially if you work with a contractor that they trust. And utilities often have a network of contractors that you can access. And that kind of segues nicely into the low income piece. Something that is newer to energy efficiency, I think, really in the last 5 years. Equity, diversity, and inclusion is really important, and ensuring that everyone can access those utility dollars that they're paying into. So utilities are really emphasizing work with programs to provide increased rebates or increased benefits to customers who have some type of income need. And so you can access those. I know up here through PSE, you can actually access those directly through those contractors. You can find contractors who can provide that increased rebate. And sometimes it's no cost to replace add a ductless heat pump, for example, which heats and cools your home. And then on top of that, utilities offer discounted rate programs for income qualified customers. So there's more to be done. I think that utilities really are just starting down the diversity inclusion journey. And I know that, translation of materials about rebates so that we can describe incentives to customers who have different cultures and different, ways of understanding the information is really important. Utilities are thinking a lot about that as well. But I do go back to contractors. Contractors are your best friend when it comes to rebates. They know the rebates. They can often apply for them for you. They can help you decide which ones are the right ones to go after, which equipment you should be installing. They're great advocates, and especially if you go through the utility to find one.
But again, I mean, in terms of the themes that Crystal has talked about, right, it really is removing those barriers, right? You're creating incentives, right, so that you can help create just enough of a tipping point so that people will change that behavior. You're working on translating those materials, right? You're thinking about which parts of the population might most benefit from this, might be most resistant to it, whatever else it may be. And it's just using the levers that you have available. And then, of course, you're using personal relationships in terms of the contractors going out, like Stephen used to, knocking on doors, meeting people, everything else, right?
Yeah, and the goal is, honestly, you probably don't know that you're participating. Like, utilities know you're not going to call the utility when your heating system fails. You're going to call a contractor, right? And so they are working with that contractor really closely to educate them and make that rebate kind of a no-brainer for the customer. So that's the best way. I think those who are more active and really interested in reducing their greenhouse gas emissions and their carbon footprint, there are great resources out there for you to figure out how you can make that difference. So it goes either way, and that's how you get to the masses, right? Make it their idea.
Go ahead, Crystal.
I was just going to ask a quick question on that. I haven't ever heard of one, but I'm super curious if you guys are aware of any utility incentives for the behavior-based changes piece of it, right? So could we incentivize a company to have a behavior science pro like on their conservation team to drive some of this, so we could have part of the money be for efficient light bulbs, and then part of the money to be to really incentivize the proper use of those and turning them off when they're not needed at all. So there could be some super interesting kind of synergies there.
Yeah, there's strategic energy management is often what utilities would call it for commercial customers. And often PSE is an example. They'll fund a position that focuses on operational and maintenance savings. You can capture some behavioral there. The critical piece is being able to monitor savings at the meter level. And I think that's something that's improving and making that easier to do, to actually capture, utilities, although they are altruistic and they want to save the energy, they want to know it's real and actual. And so often they get hindered by being able to account for the utility savings. And as we see our metering improve, we're even seeing some circuit level metering that's really interesting to capture those savings and demonstrate them to the utilities. I think that's going to be more and more available. But I encourage you to look into some of the strategic energy management programs in the meantime.
Yeah, so we actually do have those. I just think it would be interesting. So they usually have a energy, electricity background, which is fantastic. Wouldn't it be cool to partner them with somebody who has a behavior change background and really see what we could do? So maybe a pilot of some sort would be cool.
Well, and so just because, again, like you guys, Crystal, you may think that you are the least knowledgeable person on this call, but I'm going to remind you again that I know much less, and that I think much of our audience will know much less. But you guys are really talking about, so there's essentially energy efficiency actions we can take in terms of physically improving buildings. So that's installing insulation, fixing ducts, putting in a smart thermostat, air sealing your home, whatever it may be. And then, Crystal, you're talking about behavior changes in terms of, switching off the lights, managing power on your appliances or your computers, dealing with vampire loads, maybe. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And I think both are really important components of an effective energy reduction campaign. I think a lot of people focus on the technology piece and then on the awareness and communications piece, but not on the true behavior change piece. So that's what I would love to see us start moving into.
Well, and Crystal, I mean, because I think in terms of behavior change as well, right? It's also, I think, part of the same adoption curve, right? To get you to go and redo the insulation in your home or seal your ducts is potentially a big ask. But a really great gateway drug is getting you switching off the light switch. And if you keep doing the switching off of the light switch tens, hundreds, thousands of times, you're going to have that awareness and the consciousness that's going to make you want to then push for the heat pump or the insulation or whatever it may be.
Yeah, exactly that.
I have a question for you, Crystal. So at Boeing, and I know when we've helped commercial buildings in the past, right, there's the hard retrofits and then there's behavior change. So at Boeing, how do you guys look at this? How much of it is behavior change versus hard retrofits for your guys' facilities?
So obviously it's a mixture of both. I think Boeing is in a bit of a unique situation. You guys tell me if you've heard of another company that actually has a team devoted to implementing behavior changes in the energy space, right? We have about, 6, 8 people. We need a lot more just kind of devoted to this. We tend to estimate that between 1 and 3% of our energy savings can be achieved through behavior changes. Incredibly difficult to actually measure. If anybody knows how to do that well, please definitely let us know. But we're in a fortunate situation in that we have a whole team working on the infrastructure part and a whole team working on the behaviors part, and then we work hand in hand to make sure our efforts are aligned. So we're trying to check all of those boxes at the same time.
Well, and I, Crystal, I don't know about a company that has a full-time behavior change team except for EarthUP, which offers those behavior change services and expertise to anybody
Touche.
as a convenient SaaS platform available now from all the
Touche.
internets near you. So anyway, so yes, I mean, that is very much, and I'm excited to dig into that because that is very much how we think. And I think the key thing is that, again, like, if we, like, it's amazing if you rewatch An Inconvenient Truth, because the problem has been well understood. Many of these problems have been well understood for a long time. What's been lacking is connecting that knowledge to our real world experience of how people actually work and to all that behavior change science. And so now's the time for that, because we've run out of time to delay or to do anything but what is actually going to work. So Chrissy, that was very helpful. Thank you so much. And obviously, like, feel free to chime in. I can tell you, for one, I had no idea that utilities were doing this kind of work, that these rebates were available or anything like that. And so, I'm super grateful for everything that, people like you and Stephen have done. And, part of the point of this is to spread that awareness even further, because it really is incredible. And I think what's really surprising is that, I think a lot of people at the top of this webinar, if I had said, hey, energy efficiency is part of creating social equity, they would have been like, what? Right? But this topic of energy efficiency can provide so many benefits and can essentially, improve people's lives on so many different dimensions. So Crystal, calling from Prescott, Arizona. Is that correct?
That is. They say it rhymes with biscuit. So Prescott.
Oh, well, there you go. So tell us about Boeing. I mean, Stephen has told me a bunch about the Battle of the Buildings. Maybe that's a good place to start. So what was the Battle of the Buildings?
I would start by saying, what isn't the Battle of the Buildings? I love the Battle of the Buildings, more lovingly referred to as Bob. So Bob was originally created by the EPA, and in 2016, we decided that we would actually join the competition, but in a really small way. So we had 4 office buildings in one of our Seattle area sites compete against one another. So 2 teams of 2 compete against one another to see which one could reduce energy use the most over a 90-day period through doing almost nothing more than low cost, simple actions right where folks works, or like, so their cubicles, conference rooms, that sort of thing. So there was a weekly exercise that we basically just communicated through posters and emails, and did almost nothing else. Through that, we reduced our energy use in those 4 buildings by, if I recall correctly, a whopping 26%. And we beat out like 800 other office buildings to win the overall EPA competition. I always love to bring up this example when people say, but we've already addressed all the low-hanging fruit. You haven't, and we just showed you haven't, right? And so that gave us the data we needed to really be able to sell a kind of a low-cost behavior change campaign to our leaders. And so we did. So what we ended up doing is in 2018, we decided, based on that pilot, to launch the Battle of the Buildings across the entire Boeing enterprise as a way to recognize Earth Day. So we went from 4 office buildings in 2016 to 47 Boeing sites from
amazing.
5 different countries competing in 2018. That was all energy reduction, used the same exact format with the weekly exercises, mostly being communicated via email, newsletters, etc. Saw a reduction of 1.6%. And people may think that number is low, but across the Boeing company, that number is not low. If we maintain that for a year, and we did, it's enough power to power almost 3,500 homes for a year. So the ROI on that first year of Battle of the Buildings was 3 days. So that's another data point that's super important, because how many projects have an ROI of 3 days? Almost none. So then from there, we're like, okay, this is really working. And obviously, we're getting a little bit more engagement every year. The following year, we revamped the entire program with the support of the EPA, and we made it all about solid waste reduction. So we took an Energy Star program, started making it, Boeing's own. We morphed it into solid waste. That year, we had 52 sites in 6 countries compete, and we diverted enough waste. It was basically the equivalent of 10,000 homes for a week. So that was big. Then we decided to go completely different with the battle. 2020 was the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. So we decided to come up with a campaign around 50. We couldn't really think of one that was like energy specific. So what we ended up doing was we were going to ask employees to take 50 seconds for the environment every day during the competition to reduce energy, water, and waste, and then to log those actions as the way we could count them. It got all canceled because of the reasons why everything got canceled in 2020. But we're a super clever bunch, so we just modified that theme, and we launched 60 seconds for the environment this year to recognize Earth Day. So 30-day competition. Our goal, everything was tied to 60. So our goal was 60 sites compete, and we get 60,000 completed actions. What we got was 168 sites competed in 39 countries, and we got more than 72,000 completed 60-second actions through Battle of the Buildings. So in short, Boeing is a big fan of the Battle of the Buildings. It's a very low-cost way to engage employees. They have no idea that that behavior science techniques are peppered throughout everything we do. They just think it's a game. They're just in it to win it. And then we are hopefully, fingers crossed, changing behaviors as part of it.
Okay, so here's where I am going to get wonky. Let's talk behavior science. So what's some of the behavior science that you guys are drawing on here?
Yeah, so a variety of different things. So before we even launch it, we put a lot of thought into it, right? Like, what are specific things that we actually need to change people's behaviors around? So we watch them, and then we talk to them, and then we survey them, and then we do focus groups, and we figure out kind of what barriers exist, and then we try and actually remove those. So an example would be compressed air. Huge energy user, right? Everybody has lots of leaks. It's inefficient and super expensive. So we wanted employees to report compressed air leaks. Well, they can do that in less than 60 seconds. So it became one of our key 60-second actions. We asked them to hear a hiss, report this. We showed them how to do it. And then we kind of tracked whether or not we saw an increase in the number of compressed air leaks that were reported and then hopefully fixed. And then what we do, moving beyond that, we ask people to make public commitments. Yes, I'm going to report this compressed air leak. They sign it on this team board in front of them so other people see it. We start building on peer pressure and social norms. So there's a variety of different behavior science techniques peppered throughout the competition.
But I think a big part of it, and obviously this is part of what we've seen in the sciences and economics, right, is moving from a model of how we think people work to how they actually work, right? So, very often there was this idea that you would, motivate behavior change by giving people money or whatever else it may be, right? And money can help influence them, right? But a lot of what you're talking about is things like peer pressure, social pressure, emotional relationships, connection, all of that, which is a lot of what actually motivates people.
For sure. And I always think that I'm doing it super well when people have no idea it's being done, right? So, designing out choices, designing in fun, like all of that, right? That's our jam. That's our technique.
Yep. And it works very well on children, by the way. If anybody is sitting at home and trying to figure out how to manipulate their kids into studying, you can use all these same techniques for that. The right kind of peer pressure. So, I mean, that's fascinating and super interesting. And also, it sounds like you're making all of these energy reductions without doing any of these, or separate or alongside retrofits, right? Physical plants technology, right?
Right. And not only that, I mean, there is between us, a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, right? Because if we're doing those infrastructure fixes and upgrades at the same time, we're reducing behavior, or we're increasing or changing behaviors. I'm sorry. Do you think that's going to put a site at a strong advantage for winning the battle of the buildings? Heck yeah. So when I talk about changing behaviors, I'm not just talking about the employee turning off a light in an empty conference room. I'm talking about the energy engineer, making sure that the HVAC setbacks are right and that our lighting schedules match our occupancy schedules, right? And up a layer, I'm talking about the site leaders actually standing by an efficient range for those HVAC setbacks. So we're changing behaviors at every level. It's the same techniques, a little bit of a different narrative, different barriers, different motivations, but it's the same recipe.
And I think that's really important because so often in the, talk about, the environment or climate change, there tends to be a bit of a tribalization where people start to think that their part is more important, right? Like we've talked about how, sometimes people say individual action doesn't matter. It's, corporate action that matters, or sometimes people will focus on the technology changes versus the behavior changes. And the reality is that it all dovetails and they all go to support each other, right?
For sure. And quite honestly, I mean, what you just said is one of the biggest reasons why companies should stop wasting so much energy. It's super visible to their employees. And so if their employees are surrounded by perceived waste, then they're less likely to change their own behaviors. And maybe worse at the corporate level, they're less likely to believe company leaders when they're out there talking about the improvements that they've made and the accomplishments, right? So reducing visible waste for employees is a huge component to driving a really sound, sustainable corporate culture, right, around this stuff.
Well, and probably has knock-on effects for every other part of business operations as well.
Absolutely, for sure, yeah.
Well, that is super, super helpful. I mean, listen, what a dream team we have here, right? Who put this thing together, Mara? Mara, you can't see right now, but she is the woman behind the curtain pulling all the strings here, and we can't thank her enough for putting all of this together. But, I mean, I think that hopefully you've all learned a ton in going through this, and, I'd love to hear any other questions that Stephen, Chrissy, and Crystal have for each other. But I think you can start to see that, if like me, you're a New York Times reader and massively depressed by the state of the world, the good news is there are great people out there like Stephen, Chrissy, and Crystal who are working together. They have the various pieces of the puzzle and they're all working to make those pieces work together. And a topic like energy efficiency can sound uninspiring or like it's a drop in the bucket, but in practice, it's a great way to tackle a lot of these issues and make real progress on any number of fronts.
One question I have, and this is for Crystal and Chrissy, is when you are doing these savings, what do the executives want to see? Like, who are you reporting these findings to, Crystal? And then Chrissy, when you're kind of negotiating what retrofits, who are the people? Is it all about money savings? Is it to align with the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals? Like, what are the motivators that you're seeing from top down?
Yeah, so this is Crystal. I can say this year we reported to everybody. Every year we try to reach everybody, but in the last year, Boeing has established our first sustainability organization and named our first chief sustainability officer. So the stage that has been given to this kind of stuff, Battle of the Buildings, etc., has just grown exponentially. So we have been at the table with top leaders talking about kicking off Battle of the Buildings, why it's important, why we need their support, and then going in after and actually talking about the actions, hopefully the financial impact, the energy reduction, waste reduction, et cetera. And then we do that with every organization and every site, really talking about their specific impact. Gave a summary report card from Battle of the Buildings for how each major site actually performed. What actions did their employees choose the most? Who are the top kind of Bob rock stars at their sites? Make sure you guys are engaging with those folks and getting them involved, right? So we talked it at every level, internally and externally. And as always, we just changed the narrative based on the audience and talked it from the motivation of that particular audience.
On our side, one of our primary clients right now is in the grocery industry, and we're working closely with our energy operations team that's focused on facility management. So really, we're using that maintenance angle often. They're already looking at what improvements they want to make to their lighting, what remodels they think they need to do, and we're nudging them towards a more efficient decision in that, because again, we can demonstrate that return on investment that the energy savings bring by specifying more efficient equipment. In refrigeration, there's a ton of opportunity. Adding case stores to refrigeration systems has become a really hot item for grocery stores. Finally, I think for a long time they thought it would inhibit purchasing, but really it improves the look of the system, and we also find that it allows us to get in and actually improve the system components, because putting doors on requires you to really look at how the system's performing. I think the next step out of that is going to be looking at their refrigerant gas and how we can hopefully use some types of incentives. I know utilities are looking at emission reductions from refrigerants and replacing refrigerants. So, really taking that customer on a journey and aligning it with their maintenance plan and tapping into their maintenance contractors. So we're able to be flexible and subcontract to the contractors that know their systems better than anyone else, who have struggled in the past to promote energy efficiency because administratively they don't have a ton of time for it. So if we can make the sale and we can bring them to the table and they're the experts on the systems, it becomes this really nice package that we can deliver to the customer in a really turnkey way for something that they probably would have done, but they wouldn't have done it as efficiently. So yeah, again, it's similar to what Crystal said. It's getting in at the top and trying to get that decision made in alignment with their sustainability goals so that it can be applied across a larger number of sites at once. You get cost savings through that, and you also really can provide a more turnkey approach that goes quickly and the customer sees those savings right away.
And may I add one other thing to that based on what you guys were just saying? One thing that the battle has done for us is exactly what you're talking about in terms of it opens doors for us and it de-risks conservation or whatever the topic is for company leaders, right? There's very, very little risk in supporting a energy conservation competition for Earth Day. And by launching it, we get to sit at the table with those big company leaders, decision makers, right? And so through that, this year we've actually been able to, dip our toe in the One Boeing production system pool through Battle of the Buildings, especially around the actions that are manufacturing related, compressed air leaks being, a really good example of that. We had that table or a seat at the table at a really, really low risk conversation. Now we have an actual sustainability seat at the One Boeing production system table, right? And so now we're looking, how do we integrate sustainability into all that we do? That's because, in really simplistic terms, because of the Battle of the Buildings. So don't, underestimate the potential impact. Not that anybody is, because Bob's amazing, but it's far more reaching than it may even appear on the surface. It seems like a fun little game. There's a lot going on in the background to make real systemic changes.
Well, and it seems like it's also just a great way to create, team building across the organization as well.
For sure. And, there's been some requests out there, not saying we're for sure going this way next year, but our kickoff for planning for 2022 actually starts right after this meeting. Or this podcast. So the timing is perfect. But, the EPA is talking with us about maybe getting re-engaged around Battle of the Buildings. Maybe we have like a little inter-company competition, maybe with the aerospace group. My company leaders definitely want it out into the supply chain. We've had other folks reach out to see if maybe they could take it like through maybe the greater Phoenix metropolitan area with key businesses there. So it's the potential impact is big. And with that in mind, I do want to take, this opportunity to offer the Battle of the Buildings toolkit to any of your listeners and anybody who wants it. We want it out there everywhere. And so if anybody would like to learn more or take those tools and resources that we've created and make them your own, absolutely welcome to do so. Just reach out to me and we'll get it to you.
Perfect. Well, I think that Stephen Bay, I see him busily jotting down notes, so I'm sure that we would love to use EarthUP to help get Battle of the Buildings out there to our customers as well.
Something that's been really cool, and you mentioned there, Crystal, is to see how companies are actually influencing other companies to participate in this type of competition. And really, as we look at Scope 3 and how you look up and down the supply chain, really being able to engage them in a fun way instead of making demands on like, you need to do this in order for us to continue to work with them, but actually engaging them in some sort of competition like Battle of the Buildings. As Hunter mentioned, that's something that we're doing too on our platform. One of the things, and you've been on the call before too, Crystal, where we have a bunch of companies really identifying best practices. And the hope there is to understand what do these companies want and how do they do that. And almost every single company we've talked to wants to actually compete with other companies. They want to understand, you guys have a toolkit on Battle of the Buildings. One of the other companies that we've been talking with, DaVita, has a toolkit around a variety of other ways to divert waste from landfills. And it's not where we don't need to go create all our own solutions in our silos. It's time for us to kind of come together and share these toolkits and then start making it fun for us to compete and engage and do this work. So I think that's very kind of you to offer out to all the listeners too. What's a good way that they should that we should facilitate the Battle of the Buildings toolkit?
They can reach out to me via LinkedIn. Stephen, you are absolutely welcome. Have my full support to share my email address with anybody who reaches out. So however works best for you guys, share my information. Totally on board with that.
Perfect. Thank you. We will do.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting just thematically how much of the same themes come up. I mean, even what you're talking about, Chrissy, right, in terms of like really thinking about stakeholders, right? Are they motivated by maintenance? They would do it anyway, but it's potentially a bit hard for them. So you make it easy for them. And if you can remove those frictions and those transaction costs, you make it easy for them to change behavior. So I think it's just, it's amazing how much we're all talking the same language here. Again, kudos to Mara for putting all this together. But yeah, I think the reality is that, what's I think inspiring, and certainly what my experience has been in spending time with EarthUP and, the people, our customers, is just learning how many smart, good people there are out there, how much the answers exist, and how much, as Stephen says, it's now just assembling it and putting it all together, because we really do have the tools that we need.
Yeah, and we have some questions coming in from some viewers too. Lena asks, how do experts identify when things are going wrong? This is for Chrissy or Crystal. How do you identify when things are going wrong?
Well, I don't think anybody's shy about sharing when things are going wrong. So I think it's a matter of paying attention, listening. I think observations are one of the absolutely best techniques for identifying things that are going wrong, even if the employees don't know that they're going wrong. So taking a look, watching what people are doing around energy using equipment, et cetera, is a great way to figure out if things are going wrong. And then, of course, establishing metrics, right? Establishing a way where you can actually see numbers moving in one direction or another to determine if something's going wrong and get out in front of it before it goes too wrong.
Yeah, I don't know that I have much to add.
Okay.
Yes, but also, Crystal, it sounds like, part of what you're talking about is sort of the Toyota production system, Genchi Genbutsu, right? Like really going to the physical place, watching the behavior and seeing the problems that emerge.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think one of the biggest mistakes that we make in this space is making assumptions that we know why people are doing what they do and we know what they're actually doing. If anybody ever says to me that employees aren't reducing energy use because they don't care or they need more information, then I know immediately they haven't done the work to figure out why the employees aren't participating in the behavior that you need them to participate in. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of it is just really, it's about empathy and it's understanding the perspective of different stakeholders, right? And that's again, like the theme that just emerges here, right? Sustainability is not going to be one size fits all, right? It's going to have to be really customized. There are obviously different issues and different motivations in different industries, different people's households. And so we really need to like understand where people are coming from and solve their problems rather than trying to solve our own problem.
And then also understanding the basics of, behavior science techniques. If anybody wants more information, I highly recommend you learn more about social marketing, community-based social marketing, right? It was a humbling day when I realized that I was going around trying to change behaviors in all the wrong way. Information almost never changes behavior. So if that's how your campaign is focused and that's the only way it's focused, it's not going to fail. You're going to reach some of your employees, but it's going to be a small percentage. So I would just look at things in a bit of a different way. And social marketing is a really good way to do that.
That's all. There's one more question that would be great to get through before we come to a close here. Maurice was curious about resistance to change, and if you have seen or experienced any of that resistance and how you've responded.
Yeah, if this is a question for Crystal, yeah, I've seen lots of it. And the way I respond is that I don't. So I think Hunter mentioned a behavior change kind of bell curve earlier. At least that's how I heard it because that's my world, right? So part of that is the show me people, they're raring to go. Those are the folks that you might be able to change behavior with information, right? They got their hands up and they're like, me, 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 me in the middle. And most of the population is more like the help me people. They're not shut down to change. They're just not sure what they should do or how they should do it. And so that's where we focus our energy. Anything we create for those help me people, which is mostly through the barrier identification and removal, brings the show me people along. The last segment are the make me people. There has to be a consequence. There has to be a repercussion. There has to be a trip to HR or a fine or something like that. We don't have those in the sustainability world for the most part. We don't have those in conservation. I spend zero time with the make me people.
Well, that's great. And I know that we're coming.
I would just also say as well, like, I think it's also a reframing, right? Like, we, again, like when we think about our products and the products that we're selling, we tend not to think about resistance to change, right? Like if you think about our grandmothers getting on Facebook, right? Of course, they were the last people to get on because they're a little technology adverse, right? But at a certain point, that social pressure was there. And it was like, well, if you want to see pictures of your grandkids, you better get on there. And so the social pressure, the context was there for them to then change that behavior. Now we want to get our grandparents off of Facebook, but that's a totally different piece of behavior change.
You know, I know we're out of time, but thank you for that reminder. Just because someone's resistant doesn't mean they're in that make me category. It could simply be because we're addressing a perceived barrier, not a real barrier. And so that means we're not doing it in the right way. So thank you, Hunter, for that reminder. That is absolutely true. Yeah.
Yep. Awesome. Well, I think that's all she wrote. Thank you so much. The goal was to come in at an hour, and we did it exactly. I can't thank you enough. Again, Crystal calling from Prescott, Arizona, Chrissy calling from Seattle, Washington, and Stephen calling from Kirkland, Washington. And thank you again, Mara, for putting this all together. You can all learn more at earthup.eco. If you want to find out more about Battle of the Buildings or get involved, send us an email at info@earthup.eco. If you want to learn more about what Taper is doing, also email us there and we can help you connect with all of our incredible guests. So thank you so much. Next month, we will be doing e-waste, a topic near and dear to my heart now that I've learned so much about it. And so stay tuned for that next webinar.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.